गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। Yeah, this evening we're going to see how we are living in a strange world. In fact, before I start off, we're entering a strange world where there's not much differentiation between allies and enemies, and if they are there, there is strategic ambiguity, and we are in a multipolar world. Long heading, but a lot of meaning. And to decode all this, I have with me General Harimohan. General Harimohan, welcome.
Thank you,
And
sir.
yeah, it's nice to have you back on Gunner Shot. We're going to talk this complicated topic which you have chosen of allies, enemies, and strategic ambiguity in a multipolar world. Um, I think we have, it just goes without saying whether you look at our case in Opsindur or what's happening in Iran, allies have turned into enemies and enemies have turned into allies, and strategic partners have turned into adversaries. In our case, I mean, just to highlight the issue, we had USA doing a flip on us, and overnight, it's cottoning up to Pakistan. In the case of the Iran-Israel war, suddenly you see Russia turning turtle. Russia, which was supposed to be a strategic partner of Iran, is now playing both ways. It's no more with Iran the way it is. So you see this whole story where everyone you are a partner till the evening. At night, you are a different guy, and tomorrow morning, you're a different guy. And there's a whole lot of strategic ambiguity is filled on that. And no one is sure who's supporting whom, right? It is something back to the days of John Le Carre and, George Smiley kind of a situation. We don't know whom to trust and whom not to trust. So it's in this kind of a settings. I would like you to dilate this the way you're looking at it. You always made this whole thing come with a different perspective. But I think let me hand it over to you, all yours.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to all your audience. Uh, I took this topic primarily because it was something I had been researching for a while now. Actually, till about March of this year, I was working on this particular topic. I was doing a little research, and then because of the events that took place in April, May, and June, I got a little diverted. So this went into the backside. So when General Shankar asked me if you can speak on some subject, just came back to me that I pull out this research. And for the last 3 4 days, I've gone back to it, and one realizes that a lot of water has flown over the bridge in the last 3 4 months, and one look at what I had researched forced me to relook at my problem statement of the research, because new things have come out and they actually support the hypothesis which I was taking along with me. To some extent, General Shankar has already alluded to it, that there is no permanent friend and no permanent enemy in the world that we live in today. And we have to make our own standing in this world if we want to survive in this multipolar world of today. My main aim of picking up this research was during the crisis that happened in Ladakh about 4 years back. I was studying the way the MEA was going about diplomacy per se, trying to garner support from various nations, because we had a major trouble in our hands with a pandemic floating around in the country. There was no way we could have got into a full scale operation. And at that time I felt that the job of a diplomat in this kind of a scenario is extremely difficult, because he has to tread multiple lines in different dates, different times, because things are very fluid, very flexible. And as I'll start by saying what one of the prime ministers of Britain, the Great Britain, had said, and I'll quote: uh, "We have no eternal allies, and we have no perpetual enemies. Our interests are eternal and perpetual." Every word of this statement which he has written comes true today when every day you find a person changing his tract, changing the way he deals with a particular nation. Uh, and to add to it, just now, I believe the president of of the USA has moved out of the G7 summit back to Washington, and possibly he is taking a different turn to what he did a month ago when he was claiming to have negotiated a peace between India and Pakistan. So every person shows different shades, and possibly these two last words, that it is what we look at, and that is the perpetuality which stays. And again, I go by my saying that there is no permanent friends or foes in international diplomacy. It is only interests which bring nations and states together.
Yeah,
There
one
have been.
point I want to make, one point I want to make, to supplement what you're saying and complement what you're saying about Trump. Not only that he went out of the G7, that he has something more important to do, but he's also told this G7 that why didn't you include, Russia and China? He wants to get them also into this G7 thing. So the G7 was formed to, for different purposes. In fact, Russia was part of it. Earlier, it was the G8. It was taken off year before last, and China was kept purposely fully out. Now Trump has turned that around because he's got his own things, and his concept of allies and enemies are completely different from the rest of the world. So that's it. It just underlines what you're saying so far. I hope everyone is understanding this, right? Even in our case, we have no permanent allies or enemies. We only have our own Indian interests. Yeah, please carry on. Sorry.
So, going forward from there, old enmities can give way to strategic cooperation. And what we can see happening in the Middle East for the last 3 4 years post that Abraham's Accord of 2020, with Israel being recognized by Arab states. What is happening today when there is a war happening in the Middle East, possibly in an intensity which has not happened for last 50 years? The Arab states are keeping quiet, which means they have their interests more uh, in mind rather than going for old enmities. Many of these states have sworn in the early part of the previous century that all the Jews should be, herded to the ocean and killed. The same people today are keeping quiet, watching one of the states go down, watching a huge amount of operations happening in the very Palestine that they were supporting. Uh, Another issue which comes out loud and clear, and this is something which I was doing last year. You know, After the fall of the Soviet Union in the 90s, the bipolar world which was existing between World War II and the 90s uh, converted itself into something like a unipolar world. And for the next 10 to 15 years, the Americans continued to call shots in the world, saying, "Are you either you are with us or you are against us?" I guess this is one of the statements which George Bush used with President Musharraf in 2001, forced him to change his tract, and despite having ideological acceptance towards people in Afghanistan, Musharraf was forced to go with the Americans. So that is something which was I can call it American hegemony, which over the period of the next 15 years has slowly been balanced out. And today we are finding that the rest of the world is finding space to counter the Western hegemony, which was very much prevalent in the period, let's say, from the late 80s to early part of this millennium. Uh, Friends that were there at that time have become rivals, and vice versa. There are multiple examples. I would not like to go into each one of them. Just to flag one of them is Israel and Saudi Arabia, which is very, very clear that they are friends today, possibly not allies, but definitely not enemies, because they have common interests in mind. And that is what comes to the end part of this part of my talk, that it is the interests the which runs which will decide as to what kind of policy a nation takes. And despite changes in dispensations in various countries, the countries have followed the kind of policies which is in the interest of their overall growth. and that is something which needs to be understood. And I found a lot of people in social media who were quite aghast in the manner in which Russia and America did not possibly support us in the manner possibly people expected us during Op Sindoor. Despite having a terrorist incident, we didn't find that kind of traction. We had to send delegations to various countries to try and re emphasize our points of view. The point is, it did not serve their interests. And since they didn't serve their interests, they were not interested in what was happening in India. It's simple as that. Today's world, unfortunately or fortunately, has become multipolar. Why I use these words unfortunately and fortunately is when the world became unipolar, many of us were yearning for a second pole because otherwise there was one person who was controlling the entire hegemony in the world. While we were trying to find which will be the other side of the story, will Russia come back? Will China occupy that space? This period of last 20, 25 years has thrown up large number of leaderships, large number of alignments, and each of them is quite capable of challenging the Western hegemony. And that is something which is going to be the order of the day as we go forward from here. The world order has become decentralized. When I say decentralized, it has become more localized. So, say what is applicable in, let's say, ASEAN region may not be applicable in South Asia, may not be applicable in Middle East. The same nation will have a different points of view when he addresses a problem in the Middle East, a different point of view when he addresses the problem in the Indian subcontinent, and again change his point of view when he goes, let's say, to the Far East or the ASEAN. So we'll have to bear with this, and our policies will have to be decided on the manner in which we expect people to react to our issues. There is going to be competitive coexistence. When I say competitive coexistence, large number of people again have been talking as to why there is a change in which people are dealing with India compared to what was happening, let's say, 4 to 5 years ago. Well, we have now become the fourth largest economy in the world. So, by and large, another 3 years' time, we would be competing with the top two. And it's the top two who don't want India to grow in that same pace. So, in this kind of competitive coexistence, major powers will try and see how they can either retard or degrade the growth or influence of a new nation, which is likely to challenge its hegemony in the future. New coalitions are taking shape. One of them, which stands out, which was initially, in the early part of this millennium, it was floated as just a thought process that if these five economies of five different continents come together, they possibly will pose a challenge to the American and the Western economy, which is known as the BRICS. It was, for all those who know it, it was just a paper and a thought process. It was put into place by Russia, and then today possibly it is growing as a second pillar or second pole, with more and more states joining the BRICS and becoming BRICS plus. It is becoming a kind of an option for countering a single unipolar hegemony which was existing, let's say, for the later part of the last century. This means that today's policymakers have to be extremely careful while drafting policies because you could be, sailing in two different boats at the same time. And again, while I was preparing to talk today, just recollected that last month our foreign minister was attending the BRICS foreign ministers conference. Today, our prime minister is attending the G7 in Cagliari, and next month he is going to go to Rio and attend the BRICS conference. So we'll have to put up three different facets of India in 2 months, and that is the kind of world in which our policymakers have to work. We can't put up the same solution in both places because it is not productive for us. Uh, I also feel this new system is going to become more issue based coalitions. When I say issue based coalitions, it's not going to be something which is being going to be of permanent nature. Wherever an issue exists, there could be a coalition. That coalition will continue till such time that issue is ripe. The moment that issue is over or that's no longer relevant, that coalition either will lose its relevance or will get dissolved. And that is something which is happening in the world today with what is happening in the Middle East, what is happening in Eastern Europe, and to some extent what is happening in South Asia, where there are people coming together to suit a particular issue. And once the issue is over, I'm sure these coalitions won't last anymore. I would like to talk about the Quad or the Quadrilateral, which was touted as one of the, you know, or changed scenarios or changed security coalition in the world. For those who don't know, Quadrilateral or the Quad deals with four nations: the United States, the Japan, both coming from the Pacific, and India and Australia, which form part of the Indian Ocean. It is supposed to be four corners of this region, which the US calls the Indo Pacific, and it is supposed to be a kind of a coalition which has been created to counter China's growing influence in this region, in the Indo Pacific region. And it was moved with a lot of hue and this thing by Obama in his second administration, taken forward to some extent by Trump and Biden. But somehow, over a period of time, it has not grown beyond a security alliance. It did have a large number of very strategic meetings at all levels, but it has not grown into a defense and security alliance as yet. To counter this or to add to it, the Americans have brought in the AUKUS or Australia, UK, and US alliance, which, in my mind, is primarily a method to provide nuclear umbrella to Australia because Australia is a non nuclear state and it is operating under the nuclear protection of the Americans. So it is another alliance operating in the same area, but primarily a defense based alliance which has put a large amount of defense assets in the Indian and Pacific Ocean, primarily to support the interests of these three nations. Both these alliances talk about regional mainstreamism. Today, by and large, the region they are addressing is only the Indo Pacific, which transits a huge amount of energy resources both for Americans and the Chinese. And they feel that if that is dominated, China's growth can be retarded. There is also a case today of carrying out economic groupings, whether it is the G7 or the G20, even BRICS, as I look at it, is more of an economic grouping. All these groupings primarily are aimed by nations to first or take forward their own personal agenda of economic growth. The allies are taken into confidence to try and take each other's opportunities for growth in an economic field. All these alliances are going to be there for the coming future, but I feel that over a period of time, it will be the G20 which has got a larger stake in the world, which will start calling shots. And what General Shankar just now said, G7 without Russia and China does not sound logical because Canada, as it is becoming an irrelevant or less relevant nation, and UK and France have their own dynamics. So by and large, the G7 is left with just about G3, and it has to get the other people on board. Some discussions happened in the past week about or the past month when there was no invite given to our prime minister, and there was a talk that can the G7 keep India out of this kind of meet, and it has emerged that a growing economy like India is an essential component of the G7, and I won't be surprised if India becomes part of the G7 or G8 or G9 in due course of time. But I feel India as a nation will continue to try and champion the cause of the global south, which is constituted in the G20, where India has a better influence. But I won't be surprised if a call comes that we skip the G7, G20 and get into the higher group because we are going to become the third largest economy very soon. So largely what I say in today's relationship, it is flexibility and pragmatism which decide what is who's going to be your ally and who's going to be your enemy. And it is not just legacy issues that carry forward. You have to make calculated calls, At times, you have to keep certain conflicting requirements at bay, otherwise, your overall existence and growth are likely to be affected. One example is the way India and China in the 90s and the early part of this millennium kept the border issues aside and carried out economic cooperation between the two. The fact that India has now grown from being a partner to a competitor possibly has brought the border issues back in the front line. But that cannot be taken away that if you put aside your legacy issues and try and use each other's capabilities to grow, there is enough amount of scope for growth. And this is applicable in various fields wide across the world. And I'm sure there are many more and more countries. I am trying to find out more case studies to put this in my research paper as and when I carry on from it. The next thing with this comes is what I call as strategic ambiguity, and India fortunately has been blessed with this opportunity to be having strategic ambiguity in its dealings in our dealings with the foreign nations. Over a period of last year or 2 years, you have seen the way we have dealt with the Russians, the Americans, the Chinese. We have kept each one of them at bay. We have ensured that our narratives are not lost, and we have ensured that wherever we need uh, our growth, we have been able to draw it out of these nations. This strategic ambiguity is something which is going to be the main part of foreign policy for main nations in the future. No, seeing India now, I see Israel also following a similar kind of track when it is keeping Russia and Americans both at bay. Israel is one country which is still yet to call on Russia for its operations on Ukraine, despite being a close ally of the Americans. It has also balanced itself with China, despite the fact that China has aligned itself with Iran. Israel is still maintaining contacts with China. So, this is what strategic ambiguity is all about. You will have to identify where to come in and where to step back, where to maintain a balanced posture, abstain where required, vote for or against where required, and hedge your bets in the manner that is beneficial for your own growth. While I say this, ambiguity comes with its own scale of risk and opportunities. While you can exploit the opportunities, you should be aware that it can also be risky. You can be, locked outside a particular alliance because you were ambiguous and did not commit, and thereafter it will be difficult for you to get back into that same stage of where you were earlier. So that is why it is a very a tight rope for our diplomats to walk, and I'm sure the way MEA is dealing with nations, we are doing quite well in this regard, and I'm sure we should continue to go forward the way we are. Now, it is not necessary that if you are part of the bloc, everything is hunky dory. So I'll take an example of the SCO per se. The SCO, which is a China driven organization, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it has got China, Russia, India is also a permanent member, Pakistan is also a permanent member. And we have been part of this organization for quite some time, if I'm not wrong, almost a decade now. And we have been able to put across our points of view, and we have put across our points of view quite strongly, even in the periods when we were in conflict with China. And that kind of conflict situation continues despite being part of the same alliance. Similarly, in the BRICS, if you look at the BRICS, somebody mentioned, if I think I and General Shankar were only talking, if India moves out of the BRICS, it does not say a word. Remove the I, there is no join. The only link between the other four nations is the I. So in the BRICS, India with South Africa and Brazil has given China and Russia a balancing act. You had two different types of thought processes which are there. The more socialist kind of thought process coming from China and Russia, and more capitalist kind of thought processes coming from South Africa and Brazil. And we, as a responsible nation, have become the balancer in between. And we have been able to negotiate the conflicts that must be happening inside the BRICS discussions over the period of time. So that is another issue which we need to look at, that these alliances are not going to be places where everything is hunky dory. We should be able to understand the dynamics of the alliance. We should be able to make our stands very clear, and we should be able to hold our own whenever discussions happen over there. There will be external alignments also. If you recollect, last time the BRICS met, China wanted to get Pakistan into BRICS. India put its foot down because every nation has its own interest. Every nation will try and balance out wherever it is finding somebody else is gaining. And in these external conflicts, external contradictions, diplomacy has to be so well designed that you are able to achieve what you do without disturbing the overall balance of that alliance. And that is something which is going to go on even in the way forward, whether you look at our relations with the Americans, with the Europeans, even with nations like France, which has been a major supplier for weapons. There have been at times when we have been at variance with the views of what the French think of many issues. We have been able to put across our point of view and at the same time continue with our relationship in a normal manner. And that is an art which goes back to that aspect of strategic ambiguity which I mentioned earlier. There will be certain amount of overlapping memberships in the future world. You see, when the Cold War was on or post World War, there were just these two blocks. So they were either the Soviet bloc or the American bloc, and the countries got aligned to each either side. And then there was a bunch of countries which called themselves non-aligned, which in my mind was a cosmetic kind of an arrangement of people who did not matter to the world order at that stage, held, helmed by India, Egypt, and Yugoslavia. But
Yugoslavia.
over a period of time, Egypt pulled out and became part of the Western Alliance, and Yugoslavia also broke up, and parts of it went into the Western Alliance, and Siberia went back with the Soviet Union. So when you look at the NAM as it started, today the only nation which possibly stayed away from both blocs was India. So that kind of an alliance in today's world is unlikely. But what is going to happen in today's world and in the future world from now on is going to be something like a large number of what they call as Venn diagrams, which will have overlapping alliances. There will be something which will have Western influence with some alliance from the East. Example is the G7. When you look at it, India is part of the G7 as a invited member, and we participate in all their activities. Similarly, India is part of the BRICS also. So we become the kind of a bridge between those two alliances, and we can do what we want to do with the nations and part of these two alliances, and be counted in the world order. And we are fortunate that both sides are accepting India as member state, and we have a kind of standing to be counted in this kind of a situation. And while at that, there is a problem of managing contradictions, because when you go to, let's say, when the Prime Minister now goes to the BRICS session next month, he will be confronted with certain amount of issues which will be contradictory to what he discussed in the G7. And there could be a case where there will be disagreements, or there would be a kind of pull and push. And I'm sure that's where diplomacy will come, where we should be able to convince that we have been able to keep our interests in the forefront, and the interest of the alliance as a whole in the forefront while we discuss each other. And this works on both sides. And that is why I feel that it needs a lot of flexibility in approaching these kind of alliances, which are going to be the bedrock of future world order. I have been working on a large number of case studies which amplify these issues, and I would like to share one of them. Time permitting, I would like to take one more later. I will be talking about the India, China, US triangle, which is possibly the bedrock on which the future economic order of the world will rely on, because these three will become the three major economies of the world. And in that scenario, when you look at India, the US is looking at India as a forward post in its counter China strategy. And China is trying to cut down India's influence because it looks at India as a competitor in its economic engagements with the Americans. Because whatever business pulls out of China, the only area where it can come to in this current scenario is India. It is already happening, and that is something which is possibly hurting China even more. I don't know what Trump is going to do because if he wants to shift everything from China to USA, whether it will work or not, these are issues which cannot be speculated. Definitely were not speculated when I started the research. But this triangle is going to stay for long. And what the quad actually does is it is basically giving the baseline for this triangle, in which USA and India become the two baselines, trying to manage the apex, which is China. And China will try in this scenario to try and bring in other players like Russia, North Korea, and maybe some rogue states into this scheme to try and counterbalance the Quad. It will try and create rifts between India and the Americans. It will try and create rifts between India and the West, and it will try and pull India away from their focus of creating a kind of a counter base where we will become the major player. So
Yeah, no, look, I have a question on this triangle, which probably will be the most consequential triangle going forward. India, China, USA. Look, at this point of time, there is a clear hierarchy. USA is at the top, China is in the middle, and India is at the bottom. But this triangle is shifting. The base is shifting. Whichever way you look at it, the interpolar heights also will change. Because China is clearly going down. On that, there's no doubt because their fundamental demography is going down. India is going up, and it can't be stopped for many reasons because USA doesn't have a handle to stop India. That's the thing which I keep talking. And USA, by its own internal dynamics, which probably Trump has started. The if you look, where the problem of USA is, it lies in its debt. Because
all
in
in
the
China.
past 5, 6 years, the debt burden on the US economy has gone up beyond its capacity. So this has to fall, and US is ripe for a fall. And so you will see a certain amount of reordering of these three great powers, which are emerging. This might not happen immediately. It might not happen in the next 5 years. Maybe in the next 10 years, it will be there. It will be there in the next 10 years. On that, I don't have a doubt. Uh, So how do you see this thing? Don't you think then it'll no more be a case where each will seek the other out to balance the other, or will it be each on his own? And how do you see that scenario going? Because that's a very interesting scenario for us, and we need to get used to the fact that you're going to go there. And by then, I don't visualize Russia or North Korea and all these matters that much. I mean, they will always matter, but the weight they carry, or for that matter, a resurgent Europe, even if Europe there is a resurgence, will not have weight. The weight will be these three. How do you visualize that happening?
So, firstly, when I look at this triangle, I'm looking at the economical angle in the current scheme, sir. I'm not looking at the military angle as of now. So, as the growth pattern continues, we are growing around 7%. China is growing around 2.5, 3%. The Americans are growing in the sub-decimal percent, I think about 1% or something. If the same growth level lasts, let's say, for 15 years, this triangle which was here will start flattening down. The Chinese influence in terms of controlling the American debt, which you mentioned, will get, and that is something which the Americans wanted, and I don't think the current dispensation is quite understanding the value of that. When you shift a business out of China to, let's say, India, you're taking the kind of invested debt also out of China, and their money power is also going out of it, and it is getting spread. So I don't know why the current dispensation, in whatever way they are trying to say everything to go back to US, it'll work or not. But then I'm sure people are there, sane people are there who will pull it back. So in the next 10 years, when I don't see this triangle changing, but this triangle will definitely become flatter. When I say flatter, the apex of the triangle will come down, possibly as close to the straight line as possible. It is at that time when the problems will start, because the Americans will then look at India possibly in a manner that they don't want it to become another China. And it is at that stage when I see we need to put a kind of a balancing act to how to diversify ourselves and not get stuck with this own triangle. Even if Russia and the others don't come into it, I don't care. But we have to find alternatives and not just depend on the Americans. And possibly once we reach a degree of growth, which is, let's say, 5 trillion, 10 trillion economy, we will be able to call the shots, especially in these economic forums. We can't be kept out of it. And in that kind of a scenario, I'm sure the pull and push which will come will bring in smaller states, maybe take countries like Italy, Germany, which also are now peaked out as far as their growths are concerned. They are almost flat. They will possibly like to step in into those vacuum which the Americans leave, and possibly new alliances will come up. This triangle will possibly shift out, in my mind. In We'll try and replace the Americans with somebody from the Europe EU background. May not be the whole EU, but possibly some elements of EU. In that stage of It's too difficult to call at this stage, but definitely the shift will happen. Whether it will be
Yeah, I go with you because why I took this is because I want to make a couple of points in this. The issue is that even now, Indian growth is not contingent upon American growth or downfall, nor is it dependent on Chinese growth or downfall.
yes,
There will be seasonal shifts. If America something happens, there will be a consequential effect on India. The same which whatever happens in China, there will be a consequential effect on the rest of the world. That is common for all. But will it be India specific? I don't see that happening. In fact, I don't see USA or China even trying to stop our growth. If that is the case, will USA have the handle to treat us like another China? See,
no,
today,
no, sir. I don't. I personally feel we have that escape valves to get out of that kind of a trap which China has got into with USA, because we are
yeah,
not universally invested with USA. We are diversified, and that is the difference I feel will happen.
that's a very important difference which you brought out. That India is diversified to start with, and we are not dependent overtly on anyone. In fact, our growth is largely internally driven, right? And if we can go multipolar, remain multipolar, and say go the global south route, or for that matter, make links with the east and the west, in the Middle East, and uh, when I say in the west, Middle East is after all to our west, and the Southeast Asia and East Asia, our linkages, if we can improve at this point of time, and also develop alternate links with Europe, I think we will be in a safe place. That's my view. I mean, of course, I might be completely wrong in my thing, but that's my view. I want your views on that, what I'm trying to put across.
So the space which the Europe ceded was taken over by China. When you look at it, the entire economy shifted from Europe to, let's say, Asia. And when I say Asia, it shifted primarily to China, and now India is possibly catching up in that growth sphere. Whether we'll go back to Europe to drop America out of it, whether we go towards Latin America to get new avenues, these are dynamics which will come up the way other countries grow in the next decade or decade and a half. I have faith in the BRICS, less the sea. I feel at some stage in our growth pattern of the BRICS, the Chinese part will be, jettisoned, and that possibly will happen once there is enough scope for us to continue and control this alliance. And I think China also knows that. That's why it is trying to push the SCO and the BRI in a separate manner other than the BRICS agenda.
Yeah,
And
and that brings me to a very important point. You see, America has put in structures like G7, G20, and all these NAFTA and NATO and EU, and they're all American constructs. Or for that matter, AUKUS and Quad. These are American constructs. Similarly, the SCO and the BRICS were fundamentally Chinese constructs, right? Is there a case for us to start our own construct?
I
And
think
if
we
so,
did some.
when?
We
No, I'll
did.
tell
I
you
think
why.
we did.
No, I'll tell you. No, I'll tell you why. You see, when did the BRICS start really? The BRICS started really when China was at our stage.
That 15 years ago.
About 10 years, yeah, 15 years ago, when China was almost at the stage where India is. It was
Three
then the
trillion.
third largest economy. It was then the third largest economy behind Japan when the BRICS was launched. And the value of investing into BRICS is paying off for China in some manner. So, is there a case for us to start our own institution based on the global south or regional thing or something? Is there a case for us to start thinking beyond the region into global affairs, or first get hold of the region in the next 4 5 years and then go to the globe?
So, if you look at what we did with the G20 when they came here last year, we brought in the African Union into the G20. You see, today, the one continent which is totally loaded with resources and totally underdeveloped, if you was to, or underutilized, if I was to put in a word, is the African Union. They are controlling almost 60% of the future resources of the world and not yet exploited at all. And possibly, if you, that's why I said India may not like to be part of the G7 at all. We'll like to try the G20. Possibly G20 with the African Union at some stage may become a separate bloc altogether,
Entity.
driven by entity driven by India, and it could
Yeah.
possibly become the counter to G7 and BRICS. And that's why I say we may pull out of BRICS and form a third pole to this whole thing, and possibly force the Americans to deal with us in a possibly even manner.
Yeah.
This may
I
happen
think
when.
I think there's a very important point you made, and I think a very important point has come out today. Is that, look, it's time India started thinking of its own structures. That's a fundamental thing. Whether you're part of BRICS, SEO, what will be the G7, what will be G20, but India has to think differently and to form its own structures. That's the one underlying message which we take from here. Yeah, please continue.
So if you look at the world order today, amongst the P5, if you look at what is happening, it's the Americans, the Chinese, and the Russians who have some relevance. UK and France, by and large, are players on the sidelines, if I was to use the word. And if I go by an analogy, they are about to be substituted. And it is high time the world order gets substituted, and it will get substituted at a suitable time. Otherwise, the UN per se is becoming irrelevant, and that is one of the facets of research when I took up this case. That is there a case for having a UN possibly another 10 years down the line? Because if all these alignments are going to be the ones deciding the world order in the future, then there is no point of having this huge animal called the United Nations, which have neither the fangs nor teeth, nothing it has. So in my mind, over a period of time, either UN reforms itself, brings in more relevant members, expands the Security Council, changes its whole post World War kind of system to the current scenario, or it will die its own death, and
Yeah,
possibly there could be a different alignment which will come. So, in my mind, I look at the India, China, America triangle as the most important area to look at in the next 10, 15 years. And the other region which I was trying to see, and it has become very relevant today, is the Middle East post the Israel Saudi Arabian Accord, the Abraham's Accord. Saudi Arabia, whether you like it or not, they are still call the shots. But they have got the money, they got the oil. They will continue to be influencer in that region. And if Israel manages to isolate Iran, which in my mind in the last 4 days it has already done. So if it manages to isolate Iran, put a regime which is more, something as a pre-74 regime in Iran, then there is a new dynamic happening in the Middle East, and it possibly is an opportunity for India. Because why I say it's an opportunity for India, because that IMEC, which we were talking about last year after the G20, It is totally dependent on the Straits of Hormuz. Otherwise, you'll have to go around the Red Sea into the Suez. It's a much longer route. But if tomorrow you have a favorable kind of a scenario when Iraq is no longer an issue because Kuwait controls that whole water body, and Saudi Arabia and UAE are anywhere on board. So if you get that window open, and as it is, Israel is looking at an alternate canal to get out of that threat to the Suez. And if you can get into Black Sea and Mediterranean simultaneously, which is very much possible in the future world, and India being the way it is located in the Indian Ocean, we will become something like what Singapore is today. We will become the points person for all trade which is happening east or west. And I feel this last 4 days, what is happening in Iran, if it goes the way one is looking at, it has very good indications for us, and something it is another case study which I'm working on. I do feel that at some stage Iran will get changed or de-radicalized, if I was to use the word. It will have a system which will be possibly part of the entire Middle East, and the rivalry between Saudi and Iran and Israel and Iran will go. And once it goes, possibly that becomes the avenue where India can counterbalance China, because the ASEAN and those areas will totally lose relevance because the oil lies in this area, and China will have to transit this area if they want to be a power of the future. Similarly, sir, I feel Latin America and Africa also have huge amount of capability because they have
Value.
untapped energy resources, both of them, and large number of studies have been done. And God willing, if that Andaman Sea oil thing comes up, it will be a blessing in disguise because you will thereafter be a much faster growing economy with the kind of money which will come in and kind of resources which will come in.
Yeah.
I look at realignments as I look at it, sir. Um, BRICS in the next 10 years, I find it going to be relevant because China is yet not down. India is on its way up. So both I and C being part of BRICS, it will possibly be economic countermeasure to the G7. And till such time G7 either carries out a realignment or what you said, it includes other members, it will be a possibly lose out to BRICS over a period of time. And I think the Americans have seen it. They are trying to break up BRICS by getting Russia and China out of this into the G7. Because once you remove Russia and China, the BRICS will again lose its relevance as it stands today, because Americans possibly feel that Indians are anyway almost part of the G7. So it's very much possible that BRICS may come under challenge over a period of next 10, 15 years. But if not, then BRICS will become a major economic forum to counter the growth of Europe, and Europe will be the sufferer because Americans are going to jettison them in a suitable time to suit their own interests in any way. I feel China's foray into the Middle East is going to find a lot of resistance. The BRI is not going anywhere because the area which they are targeted as the BRI is not going to be stable in the period of time to come. And if the IMEC does happen before that, then the BRI is a gone case. Then China will have to look at alternate routes to grow, possibly through Central Asia or possibly through the northern route through Russia. And that is an extremely arduous and a long route for China to grow. So I don't see the Chinese growth, especially the Belt and Road Initiative, going anywhere beyond.
Oh,
Even the
Belt and
CPEC,
Road is dead. Belt and
even the
Road is dead.
CPEC,
Even CPEC is dead. CPEC is
is
also
dead.
dead. Right.
So,
In fact,
so they don't have any
the way I look,
organization.
China has lost its, geopolitical mojo. That's the thing. No one trusts them. No one, and plus the fact that they have internal problems and all, they're not going to come out of it in a hurry. I'm not too bothered about this thing. The thing which we need to do is how do we sustain ourselves? What do we do? And our biggest problem going forth is not going to be anyone but USA.
So
USA will be a problem.
so when I look at Asia, last couple of years back, we went into a policy called Act East policy. We
Yeah,
said everything is lying in the east. But if IMEC works, and if we have
everything is
enough
the
oil,
West.
then we'll have to change. We'll have to turn 180 degrees and
Uh,
start looking
uh,
left.
yeah, I agree with you. I think somewhere we need to find our own balance as to where
We
we
have
are
to find
heading.
a balance because at some stage we can't keep looking east and acting west.
Yes, yeah,
It'll become very difficult. And I
yeah,
feel somehow Asia will bifurcate. There will be two different alignments in Asia, east of India and west of India. There will be
yeah,
two different alliances. Both of them will have relevance. And if we become the pivot on which this bifurcation happens, we can choose and use the best of both, but whether it is the eastern part towards Japan or the western part towards Europe, and both of them are beneficial to India. Multilateral governance is the order of the day, and I think we should engage with all governments. That is something many people in the social media should understand. There are questions asked why India is going to Cyprus. Yesterday there was too much of noise going in. People should realize Cyprus is going to be the chairperson of the EU next year, and good relations with Cyprus means entry into EU. So my larger point is you have to identify opportunities well in time, and once identified, you should start engaging. And once you have engaged, thereafter you can hold on to it and climb forward. So it's a game which I'm sure people are well known. People are working on it, and I'm very much confident that we will be going the right way. I feel there will be a north-south, that gap between the north and the south, the global north and the global south will come down. The G7 and G20 gaps will come down drastically in the next coming decade, 2 decades. And that possibly will be the time when, like you said, are you looking at that, or are you looking at taking one of them and riding it to success? It's something we can look at. I feel time we start looking at our relationship in a pragmatic manner, give up our ideological issues to get pragmatic results. There will be certain times when governments will have to make compromises to deal with certain governments or certain dispensations which are currently ideologically not matched with us, but that is possibly keeping the pragmatic issues of growth. And that's where I said it is a very tricky kind of a scenario where you have to show one face, at the same time deal with 10 people you don't necessarily agree with in the manner in which they carry out this thing. So I look at diplomacy, which needs, this is something which I'm sure the government should start looking at. The foreign service, the way it is structured today, needs to grow. We can't, keep the foreign service in the levels at which we are, because we are a growing nation, and we need to have much more human resource in the foreign service, and quality human resource. I look at people in the government who can go sideways and do a lot of work in the diplomatic levels, especially even the armed forces officers are adept at handling these kind of scenarios. Possibly we can look at expanding them into these things. We have to look at issue-based partnerships, and I'm sure people at Helm are working on it. Large number of study groups and think tanks are working on this in terms of identifying what are the issues to look forward to, and which are the partners which can take forward these issues to their logical conclusions. And those things possibly are the way we have to look forward. And at times we have to possibly even keep our political um, acumen to one side in the larger interest of growth of the country. And there would be a time when you may have to make alliances as against diverging ideologies. I won't be surprised if there is a requirement, even we have to make an alliance with North Korea for all national interest. We should. Why not? We are not justifying the alliance. We are looking at our own growth. Indeed, we should be selfish. I look at it that way. As a nation, we should look at our own growth, let alone how we grow from there, with some degree of whatever you can keep humanity and etc. in mind, but then largely we should not get tied down by these kind of ideologies. There are large number of swing states. These are states which are looking at a leader, and like General Shankar said, these are the states that need to be brought under an umbrella and take a launch. States like Saudi Arabia, states like Nigeria, states like Brazil. These are states which are at the moment available for an alignment, and possibly somewhere down the line, once you have a foot on the ground, you can look at creating an alliance and take these swing states along. We have to put up very strong requirement to reform the global institutions. We can't stay part of a UN which is, in the manner which it is, and we continue to subscribe both in terms of monetary as well as human resource to this kind of an organization where we are not getting our due. Similarly, there are other elements, World Bank, the IMF, all needs a degree of a reform. And I'm sure once we are in a position to call the shots through our alignments, the country will take these forward. As a nation, we need to identify how to mitigate conflicts. The lead taken by the Prime Minister to try and diffuse the Ukraine-Russia war, these are indicators. If you can become a major player which can bring two people together, the end result is both will get aligned to you and you will get the benefits of both these countries. And that is something where diplomacy needs to work harder, possibly try and find loopholes, gaps, areas where you can get in, mitigate, and then possibly take your own things forward. I think I will stop here, sir. I was trying to
Yeah,
speak for
fine.
a point.
We'll take a few questions because there are a lot of issues which I think are there, and we'll right. Oh,
And I'd like to request your audience, if you have, since I'm still doing a research on this subject, if you have a viewpoint, you can please communicate to me. It will help me, streamline my research. Try to look at it in a different manner.
okay. Let's take this question. Uh, Sir, please explain in detail what did you mean by bifurcation of Russia? Did you mean literally breakup of Russia in two parts, or Western European Russia and Eastern Asian Russia? Please explain.
No, no, no. I said bifurcation of Asia. I
Yeah.
said bifurcation of Asia. When I said bifurcation of Asia, Asia east
Mm,
of India and Asia west of India should be looked in a different manner, because both have
mm.
different dynamics. As I mentioned, in the west there are resources, in the east you have trade. So you have
Yeah,
to ensure balance between the two.
yeah, yeah. Ask if US has to invade Iran, then will India eventually down the road be pushed to supply troops? I'd read this happened when US invaded Iraq, but we declined. Will we be asked for IMEC's sake? What's your view?
So there are two routes for the IMEC as I look at it. Both have their own problems. The
No,
southern route.
let's look at the issue of whether
No, that's why
the
I'm
Iran.
coming to it. I'm coming to it. It's
Okay.
a Hobson's choice. That's what I'm trying to bring. One route is going around Yemen through the Red Sea, through the Suez. The other route is the shorter route going to Strait of Hormuz and through land route to Israel and then getting across into the Europe. I feel the route around Yemen is fraught with danger because you are literally touching the Horn of Africa and there are large amount of problems there. The IMEC will not succeed. So willy nilly, you will be forced to stick to the route which is going with Iran. I don't see Americans invading Iran in the first place. They will try and carry out certain actions in the covered domain because the aim is not to occupy Iran. Aim is to execute a change of regime. And I guess there is a kind of degree of coercion which is already there, and there is a kind of base which the Israelis have already created on which the Americans can carry out their operations. So I don't see Americans bringing Indians into it because it will bring India into the play which I don't think Americans would want at this stage. Because in the IMEC, the Americans are the last beneficiaries. It is basically the Europeans which will benefit first. So I don't see the Americans, handing over this pie to India in this current scenario. And they also know that India and Iran have a very long-standing relationship, and they will not like to involve India in any activity in Iran. It will possibly ask India to uh, maybe look the other side and not make an issue out of it because we have our assets in Chabahar and all these areas which have links and reasons for us to be, alarmed if operation happens in Iran. So that withstanding, I don't see India getting pulled into this conflict at the moment. Yes, The problem is Israel has unilaterally helped us during Op Sindoor and will look at India providing them, if not physical, but definitely moral support in their operations in Iran, which is a tricky kind of diplomacy which we have to step in because we have to fight from both sides. Because we are dependent on Iranian oil to a large extent, and we are also dependent on Iran as a strategic partner towards our incursions towards Central Asia. So that is a very a kind of a slippery slope on which we will be walking. I'm sure the people who are to take action on this are working on options to try and find a balance between these two requirements and ensure that we come out unscathed.
Yeah, I look, it's like this. I'll also put my two bits on this. Any regime change in Iran uh, will not make Iran completely aligned with USA or Israel. Let's be clear about that. Okay. Because ultimately Israel has to Iran has to stabilize on its own way. That's the first thing. You look at what's happened in Iraq. Iraq, they went in, and now Iraq is in a mess. It's not under anyone's control. It's neither under US control. US still has to keep troops there to control Iraq. So, will they like to go into a similar kind of arrangement here? I don't think so. Can they avoid it? I don't think so. If they allow India to get in there, their whole India will upstage all these fellows. That's the thing with Iraq. Please understand. And we have our own interest in Iran, and those interests align perfectly with what Iranians want. And then so allowing India into that is got it's TNT as far as this is concerned. But we rest assured, whatever happens, the next 5 years we are going to have an unstable neighborhood. Iran will not Iran will not stabilize for the next 5 years. That's the minimum time. The amount of destabilization which has gone in already, irrespective of there's a regime change or not, there'll be destabilization. This region will remain destabilized. Notwithstanding all the grand theories we can work, we have to work in a destabilized world. That's something which we have to be very clear on. Yeah, we'll take another question and then, yeah. Yeah, let's look at this. Sir, Trump is trying to completely remove the thought of de-dollarization and therefore asked G7 to include Russia and China. Your thoughts in view of the huge American debt?
Actually, um, he got flummoxed because he's fearing that BRICS will announce a currency, and the entire debt, as far as the Americans' external debt, are all with Chinese. China holds all the treasury bonds, dollar bonds with them. So if he pledges the dollar bonds and converts it into a currency which is countering the American dollars, the dollar will fall. It'll go out of business. So that is why it threatened India last time that please don't get into a system which talks about a new currency. And I think by and large pressurized India to not support such a thing. And
Yeah,
I
but
don't think
there's a
support also because it is not in India's interest also because it will
interest. Yeah, and
give China a rope, a sinking China rope to survive. So we will possibly try and hold back this kind of. But Russia is not in a state to influence it because it is fully engaged and its economy is not so good at this current moment. It's unlikely to influence, and India will not influence. So I don't think
yeah,
this
not
will
only
happen.
that, even China is not in a position to give an alternate currency to the world. So I don't see, very fundamentally, China cannot put up an alternate currency, neither can India nor can Russia. So the BRICS currency is out of the equation long
Out of
back.
the issue. So
In fact, it was
de-dollarization
never
won't
there.
happen. So
Mm.
de-dollarization won't happen.
Won't happen, right? That's the thing. Yeah. Okay, he says we think of Trump as a Dumbo, but his idea of getting Russia and China into G7 is far-sighted. Lieutenant General Iyer is right. I agree with him, right? And that's why I picked it up. Yeah. Last question. Africa and South America hold key for future development, are exploited and neglected now by all players. Offering equitable participation into future's economy by India will increase or heft as a reliable and dependable partner. I agree with him. That's what General
That's
Harimohan
what
also mentioned. Okay. Okay. So I think at this point of time, we've answered a few questions. This was talk into the future. Why I purposefully brought this in, I must tell everyone, is that this talk was quite amorphous, if you saw. Right? At some point of time, you would have felt there's no head or tail to this. But that's the future. And the future in which we are heading is going to be as amorphous as this. And that future is unfolding in Iran and at this point of time. Irrespective of what happens in Iran, we are going to have an unstable system. One feature, a major feature of what's happening in Iran is this, and people have to understand. Russia has flipped and has assumed a different posture altogether. China is completely incapacitated and it is not even speaking a whimper. There is no opposition to what USA is doing. Okay, you think it's good or bad is a different story. But what USA is getting into in Iran or Israel is getting into Iran is also not good. It is not going to be a stable experience for USA to get in. USA might end up with another Afghanistan. Please remember this. That that whole story one should forget. So we are living, and when today USA gets into Afghanistan kind of a situation, right? You're, I mean, Russia is out of the equation, China is out of the equation virtually. Who will come into the equation? Guys like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, all these fellows only will come into the equation. And India will not be out of it. Let me assure you. And if we think Asim Munir has been called to USA for 7 days for anything funny, just forget it. It is all the story there, part of it. Okay. I mean, this is what I have to say. If you have to say anything, a quick closing comment from you, and then we'll close it.
So, totally agree with you. The I feel Americans didn't want to step in on their own. They wanted Israelis to do their dirty job, and they felt that possibly and by remote controlling they'll be able to achieve. Unfortunately or fortunately, they did not anticipate the kind of response which came from Iran. They possibly felt that over a period of a week they will achieve their end results, and as of now possibly they have to physically intervene. I totally agree with you. Russia doesn't have scope to come into this area in this current scenario. China, I believe, have done some signatures. I believe some aircrafts have landed with some stores.
That's
It'll have
minor,
some kind of it'll have some kind of
marginal.
symbolic kind of support. Countries like Iraq, Saudi Arabia will be just waiting on the sidelines, wanting Iran to collapse because Iran is the only um, hegemonic power in that region. And once Iran collapses, Saudi Arabia becomes the undisputed, Badshah of the
King of
Middle
that
East.
place. Yeah,
Middle East. So when you look at
yeah.
the kind of scenario, I totally agree. Iran is in doldrums, and the entire area west of Pakistan. And I also see a glimmer of hope that possibly in this kind of a scenario, Balochistan is an opportunity. It possibly might happen and possibly create a new dynamic to the region because you'll have two unstable countries in that kind of a scenario.
Yeah,
But yes,
I think so. Let's see how it plays out in the future. Thanks a lot for your views, right? And thanks a lot for all those who attended. All those who have not attended have missed something. They missed seeing the future. That's what I want to tell you. Okay? It's an amorphous subject, and what is going to come ahead is a lot of fog. And we've tried to clear some of that fog today. Right? And when you clear that fog, you see more fog. So that's how it goes. And that's the future. Right? Before I finish off, I'd like to thank Rao Kotapalli for becoming a YouTube member. I'd also like to thank Deep Patel for becoming a YouTube member. I'd request all of you who have joined us today, press the like button and also subscribe to the channel. With this, thank you. Good evening. And like I said today morning, tomorrow we're going to talk of China. Because if we don't understand and put our pulse on what's happening in China, we'll be out of the equation. And tomorrow evening, I'll get back to Iran and Iraq, Iran and Israel, and what's happening, because by then I think something substantial will happen. Right? I think something substantial will start happening tonight. It might I might be off by about 24 to 48 hours, but by tomorrow evening, I think we can discuss Iran and Israel and the future of Iran in a more cogent manner. With this, thank you. Good evening and Jai Hind
Good
to
evening.
everyone, and Jai Hind to you also, Hari. Thank you.
Right, sir.